All right, and we're back. I'm a little bit sick today, so I'll try my best to be as clear as I can be. We are COMP125. That is client-side web development, and it is the summer 2016 semester, week 4, part 3 of our broadcast. Last time we were building a form. We'll continue with that today, and we'll talk about how to kind of link to it and so on. I have to point at a couple things today. One, you have a new assignment that's up on Dropbox, assignment number 2, which is an extension of assignment number 1. So let's take a look at that one first. I want to talk about the assignment that's coming up. So we're going to be doing something called a portfolio update for your contact page, right? So your contact page for your first part of your portfolio that's due Friday, as an example, it did not require a working page. But what I'm asking for now is to actually get the data that the user enters and kind of save it in some variables and then expose it on the console. So basically what you're going to do is it's going to output to the console. Now remember, if you make a page that posts or gets, if you use that kind of form, your data will not show. It'll disappear because then the page will redirect you right back. It'll refresh the page, and then the console will be wiped out. So please, you need to use a different kinds of button. It can't be a submit type button, and you can't do a put or a post or a get on the form that you're making, or else it'll refresh that page. It'll be gone, right? So for now, yeah, it should be up there. It should be up on a Dropbox. Is it not? Let's put it up on Dropbox. Today is one of those days. So I can the data. Did you see the actual document or no? Okay, we'll put the document up there now. Today is a comedy of errors. Let's see. Let's go here. East Centennial. I know, it's just crazy. It's my fault, man. All right. Thank you for that. Client-side web development, and we'll go into Dropbox for assignment 2, and I'll add in that PDF. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Yeah, I try and put the rubrics in. This is a new thing I've been doing this this year. Is I want to try and put the rubric in so that you have all the details for how you're being marked. It's a little bit new, and I'm not sure how eCentennial is going to handle it, but we'll figure it out. And that way you know where your marks are coming from, so there's no, you get good feedback. That's the idea, right? As opposed to for assignments anyway. For little labs, there's no rubric. It's either, it's a pass-fail kind of thing. You might get 1 mark or 2 marks. That's for labs, right? But for assignments, you're going to get more detailed work because they're worth much more. Like your first assignment's worth 15% of your final mark. That's going to be, I need to give you some more feedback for that. That's why there's a rubric behind it. Same thing with assignment 2. So with assignment 2, going back to that, again, it's worth 10% of your final grade. But it's due next week. And I know that some of you have JavaScript, and the other assignment that you have is also due next week on Friday. I'm sorry, I don't mean to try and put 2 assignments on you at the same time, but both are little updates to your the things that you've been doing, right? So some people are doing C#, and there's an assignment due next week. Other people are doing JavaScript with me, and the assignment due next week on Friday as well. So I honestly think this one is the easier one than the C# one. I think if you're in both courses, if you're in COMP123, Programming 2, and if you're in COMP125, JavaScript, right, client-side web development, like this course here that we're in, then this one would be the easier one to do, this JavaScript one, for this particular time. I think the C# one is going to be more difficult because we're using inheritance, right? So let's talk about this one. So I want you to create, or make sure the contact page is structured in a different way. I'm giving it to you early. And normally I usually try and wait till your assignment 1 is done before I give you assignment 2. But the reason why I'm giving you this early is because, hey, you're almost finished your assignment 1. What's wrong with structuring your assignment 1 so assignment 2 is almost done, right? So this is why I'm saying it's going to be easier to do this. I still need 2 submissions though, okay? So I still need 2 submissions. And when you create your second submission, I want to put it out there to you. Don't give me the link for assignment 1, your mini portfolio site. Your mini portfolio site should have its own link, right? Like if you're making a link up on Azure, or if you're using the school server, please make 2 separate links, one for assignment 1, another one for assignment 2. So that way they're separate, right? Even though the data might be the exact same, you're basing your second assignment off of your first one, right? I still want you to create another project, right, that has everything you need for assignment 2. Please don't make them the same. That would be bad, all right? So that's one thing. In fact, some people have done that in the past. They've handed me assignment 1 again, and they even call it assignment 1 in their submission. You'll lose marks for that. I'm just being honest with you. It's not something we do. I mean, typically, I know other professors would give you 0, right, as well. Please don't make that mistake. Make 2 separate submissions. This is an extension of assignment 1. So what am I asking for here? I'm asking you to structure your page, and so your contact form is very specific. That it asks for a first name, last name, email, contact number, and message, right? Well, we've already built that today. I mean, we built that last day. So you kind of have what I'm looking for, right? And I have 2 buttons, a cancel button and a send button. I did that last day too. I've almost given you assignment 2, if you think about it, right? I just want you to incorporate it into your portfolio site. So what I want you to do then is when the user enters his data, whatever it is, right? I want you to take that data, store it inside of some kind of structure, some kind of variables, and spit it out to the console. And now we'll have everything. After you do assignment 2, again, it's just a little practice. It's worth 10%, but really, it's really easy to do, right? You'll be able to do both things on your exam. You'll be able to push data out to the HTML page and retrieve data from the HTML page. You'll be able to, kind of write and read from the page using JavaScript, which is what I want to accomplish with these 2 little assignments. Okay. The first one's a little bigger. It's worth 15% because you got to put some content in there. There's some structure. It's a little bit more complex, the first assignment. The second assignment really should be worth 5%, not 10%. I'm making it worth 10% because it'll give you a bit of a boost, a bonus, if everyone should get really good on it, because all I'm asking you to do is a contact page, which I've already given you, right? So that's what's due next Friday. Some of the same stuff is due. Internal documentation, all that stuff is the same. Share your files on GitHub. Please give me a separate repository for this assignment. Don't give me the same repository. Do not point to assignment 1. All right, make a separate assignment. Make a separate project based on the other one, right? So assignment 2, you're gonna have another repository for that. So when I look at your repository, your repo online for assignment 2, it should say assignment 2. It should not say assignment 1. Or please don't say, please look at my assignment 1 repository. It's the same. All right? No. If you give me that, you'll get 0 for your GitHub. That's not what I'm asking for. Yes. I recommend it because it says that here. It says deploy to your cloud server using Git, right? Or worst case scenario, if you can't make your cloud server, I will accept the school server as an alternative. However, I recommend against it. I think you should learn how to do it on the cloud provider. It's the new and modern way to do stuff. Any questions about assignment 2? Very similar rubric, slightly different mark spread. Again, it's worth 30 points, 10% of your final grade, due next week, Friday by midnight. Just a little bit of an update. I'm going to give you these little ones, these little 5%, 10% assignments, and they're going to be stuff that we've talked about in class to give you practice to incorporate what you've got, your contact form, or some other feature we're going to add into your site using JavaScript. Now, right now, we're just still, in my opinion, still scratching the surface of JavaScript. We're not really even done a lot of it. You should know some of it already, functions and so on, but at the end of the day, it's very, very simple stuff we've done so far to date. Okay, that's assignment 2. I wanted to introduce a new opportunity for you guys to, if you have real problems configuring your machine, and you want to use some kind of editor, like the one we've been using so far, but as an example, you've had real trouble doing it, or you're moving around a lot, or you forget your laptop, or you don't have a laptop, but you want to have similar functionality to what we're doing in class. There's a service you can subscribe to for free called Cloudnine, right? What it does is it gives you an online IDE, an online editor that you can use to do, and that you can use a Chromebook for this. You don't even have to install any software. It's really quite neat. How do I sign in? You can actually sign in with a GitHub, actually. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So when I'm signed into Cloudnine, after you sign up for free, the free version, you can create a workspace. If I click on a workspace, and notice that I can, in here, I can create something like an HTML5 workspace or a node, if you want to do a node workspace. If you're working with C++ or Python or something else, all these things are available to you and many more. You can also choose, as an example, to make it private or public. If for the free account you get one private workspace and the rest are public, that means everyone else can look at your code. Yes. Oh no, there's no student thing for it. But the good thing is that you have access to it for free. There's a free account. There's no pay in terms of it. So you can host a new workspace. You can clone a workspace too, right? So again, you put in your you can clone a workspace from an existing workspace if you have one as well, right? You can also link up to it from GitHub. An example of this is, here's my GitHub, and I can link up to that this way, right? So how do I do that? Well, let's say if I have a GitHub, I have a Git repository. Like an example would be COMP125 lesson 4. This is my Git repository that I was creating, and I want to work on my stuff, right? Well, all I need to give them is my URI, right? So, and again, this is something right here. So this is the GitHub repository right here, and so it'd be this address plus .git at the end, right? So I'm going to copy this, and if I go to my my workspace here, and I kind of put it in like this, paste, .git, right? And then and this is the optional piece, right? I'm working with HTML5 as an example, public, and create my workspace, right? Oh, my project name, I should probably call it something. So let's just call it the same thing, COMP125 lesson 4, right? Just to make sure that what it is, and if I click create workspace, if I'm right, oh, workspace can only have one lowercase letters. Okay, talk about this again. Sorry, and no underscores. COMP125 lesson 4. So can I do minus? I think it has to be underscores. Lesson 4. Let's try that again. Creating the workspace. Blah blah blah. Right, creating the container. And what you can do online is you can fully work online separately, as opposed to working on your local machine. So okay, some people really like this feature, right? Notice I have all my stuff right here, and I have down here a little window, right? Take a look, where I can run stuff, run commands. Git is built in, so I can do something like git log tells me all my commits, right? And guys and girls, this is awesome if you don't have your Git working properly, and you don't want to use Visual Studio Code, or maybe your laptop isn't working right, or whatever. Ta-da! This is another solution for you. Yes. It saves it all online, so everything is done online on the cloud, right?
On that cloud, or does it send it back to GitHub?
Both. If you want to, you can update. So let's say, for example, remember we can work with GitHub and other providers, right, at the same time. So I have my local project, which is right here. This is my local project, right? And I have my remote project, which is this one now that I'm working with Cloudnine, right? So let's say I make a change. Let's say I look at scripts, and here's my app.js. So double click, and here I kill the README script for a second. Notice this is my app.js that's exact like it was before, right? And let's say I want to add a little comment. So I'll add a funky new comment like, this is a test for Cloudnine, right? And I'll save the file. There it is. So same save commands or whatever. And then what I want to do is I want to upload to GitHub, right? So I kind of clear the screen, and I'll say git commit, or sorry, git add dot, all the same commands, right? Git commit -m, and we'll say added test comment to app.js, right? And then I'll say git push origin master, just like we normally do, and bam, if I put it in my username, because it doesn't know my username here, although I can probably set it up so it does, right? Good. And then what it does, it uploads to Git. And now what I can do locally later on is I can come into Git and come here and do a pull, right? And what that'll do is it'll pull my comment, right? So basically what I've done is I've put it up to Git, and I've pulled it back from Git. So you can work both online and locally, right, and not a problem. So if you want to use an online service, Cloudnine is a really cool service. A lot of people are using this for no development because there's absolutely no setup. You're ready to go. Like you can do JavaScript and HTML, and Node, and other languages really, really quickly. It gives really good code hinting as well. So if I'm up on the cloud service, as an example, and if I wanted to put something else in, like for example, I've declared other objects here, like paragraph 0, whatever. Or if I want to do something else, like let's say if I declare a new variable, my variable, and I say something like equals to document, see, like it gives me good code hinting, dot get element by ID. Like it'll do all that stuff for you. So all the same code hinting that you know and love that are in Visual Studio, a lot of it's right here up online, and I think it's a great solution for you. The other thing is you can test everything right in here, right? I can create a runner. I can test the program here by running it. So it'll run the code locally, right? And if there's a problem, right now I don't have a running solution, but if there's a problem, I can actually create a small server locally to test it on to test it here inside of the actual object, right? So take a look at Cloudnine if you're interested. I think it's a great little solution for you to solve some problems when it comes to if your environment's not set up properly, or you don't have an environment, or you're on the go, right? You're using the school computer, and you know what? You want to use VS Code, but it's not installed, or you want to access your files from anywhere. This is a great way to do it. Kind of set up a workspace, so you can have unlimited workspaces on Cloudnine for free, but you can only have one private workspace. Okay, so Cloudnine. Just wanted to give you another tool if you wanted to use it. Okay, talk about this in a second. So last day we were kind of doing this debugging stuff, and I created this little contact form, right? Let me just run this little contact form here for a second. All right, so again, I'm going to go in here like this, and we're going to kind of pull up Reveal in Explorer or Finder. And notice locally, I can come up to here like this, and we're going to double click on my index.html. And it'll give me this. And as I click through, I can see my project changing. If I click my contact page, contact me, as an example, here it is, right? So I want to talk about debugging, right? This is what this week is all about. I created my contact page with you. It doesn't really do anything right now. The only thing it does is it redirects me back to the home page. That's what it does, right? But this piece doesn't work yet. My send doesn't work yet. We're going to make another little test. I can't give you the entire solution, but I'm going to give you another test to get information back, right? So if I click send, right now it doesn't do anything, right? Also, notice in my contact page, if I was actually looking at it, so here's my contact.html. That's why I made it happen. I made it do that. Yeah. So what I did was I did that in my cancel button. Notice that my buttons they're not button elements. They're A tags, anchor tags. Why? If you use button elements, and especially if you use special button elements like a type, for example, type submit, type reset, or cancel, it'll actually activate your form and it'll charge up your form. It'll kind of mess things up. Let me give you an example of that. All right. So let's make this send button or the cancel button a button instead of an anchor tag. Remember, the reason why it looks like a button here, like this, is because I'm using Bootstrap. Bootstrap is coloring this thing and making it look like a button. Okay, but at the end of the day, all it is an anchor tag, a list, a link. That's all it is, right? So when it's a link, it's not officially a button from a form for a form perspective, and so it acts a little bit differently, right? But if I made it into a button, let's make my send button into a button for a second. So I go button. Because this is what you may be used to seeing. There we go. There's a button, right? I'm gonna save this thing. I'm gonna refresh my page. Does it change anything here? No. But if I click send now, right? It says, hey, it starts doing some validation. Look at the difference here. Before my anchor tag didn't do anything, but now it does. Now it's saying, hey, if I click send, it says, please fill out this field. So buttons have that kind of use. I've changed it from an anchor tag into a button. I want to still keep my cancel button into an anchor tag though, because if I change this into a button, it's still going to ask me for this, right? Because I've put required fields on each of my form items, when I click any button in my form, it'll try and validate what's happening. Because what we're using here is HTML5 validation, right? My placeholder is my placeholder text. And then I have these required tags on my form. The required tags make me enter something in there, right, that's somewhat valid, right, when I click my button. For example, if I type my name, right? So here's what, some simple validation. If I click send now, it'll say, hey, enter an email. Please fill out this field. If I fill it out wrong, like this, it'll start saying, please include an asterisk or an @ sign, right? But it won't do any other kind of validation. For example, if I go Tom at, and if I click send, right? Well, I got to put the next piece, an example, right? Now it'll skip. Is that a complete email address? No, right? So just some validation, but not everything. And we're going to hit validation later on in the course. So I'm not asking you to validate the input right now from your form, okay? I'm just asking you to create a form for assignment 2. I'm asking you to create a form that actually captures the data, right? So tom@example.com, that would be more reasonable. My phone number, right? And if I click on send, right? Again, it says fill out this field. If I hit a number like this and click send, it'll accept it, right? Doesn't matter, right? And that's what I'm saying. The validation, there's no validation here from a JavaScript perspective on the form. Right, so let's try this, put it in, 416-555-5555, and then some kind of message. Even if I click this, it'll ask me to put in a message like, hello, right? Now, if I click send now, what happened? What did it just do? It submitted the form, right? And what's happened is it's gone back to this. So where did your data go? That's what I'm saying, peoples, right? You got to be careful because the data that you would normally get in your console, so let's just reload the form, let's just inspect the form here for a second. Here's my form, right? This is where my data would go. Would this be cleared along with my form being submitted? You gotta think about that for a second and what that does. How do I stop that functionality from happening? And there is some JavaScript to do that, all right? We're going to talk about that today because you need to know these pieces or else it's going to always do what it's supposed to do, the desired behavior. Actually, what it's called is default behavior. And what we want to do is prevent default behavior, which is to submit the form. Does that make sense? Let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, so we got a form, but in order for me to activate this form, I need a couple of things. One, I want to keep it like this for a second. One is my ID is send button. That's the way I can hook into my button through this ID. Right now, my href value for my button doesn't go anywhere. In fact, as a button, I don't even need this piece because it's not a link anymore. So save this. I need to be able to hook into it, and send button is the thing I need to hook into. Now remember, send button is only exists in my contact form. It doesn't exist right now in any other part of my my project, right? So if I go to my app.js, and if I create some kind of link to my button in this form, in this app.js as an example, right? Then I have to test for it. For example, if the button exists, I can make I can kind of do one of these, get element by ID, but I got to test to see that it's not undefined. All right? If it's undefined, then if I try and do something with a button, right? If I set up an event handler or something like that, it won't work. Okay, so let's set up, first of all, a link or some kind of reference to the button. How would I do such a thing, first of all? Remember, I want to create, just like the same thing that we're doing here, I want to do with a button. What do I do? It's actually right here in front of you. Tell me the answer. I want to hook into the button. What do I do? In JavaScript. Yes. Get element by ID. Same thing, same idea. But we need to call it something. So we need to declare something, right? And normally what I like to do is try and declare all my variables as close to the top of my function. This is an anonymous function, and this is a self-executing function. But still, this function closure is still a function. So at the top of my code, as much as possible, and by the way, this is an exception what I've done here, right? Where I've kind of put this declaration here because I've declared two different variables, right? I've initialized the variables here. I want to try and put it at the top of my function as much as possible. Let's put it underneath paragraphs, right? So let's kind of create a reference to the send button, right? That's what I want to do. Now I need to be very clear about what this. How do I create a reference? And if I look back in my contact.html, I got to make sure that the send button is what I'm clicking to, right? So let's go back. So now I declare it, and I'm probably going to call it the same name. So send button, right, is equal to document.getElementById, and then I want to call this send button. Notice that Visual Studio detected send button as an element, and all I'm doing is creating a formal reference to the send button. Okay, now that I've got this, I want to create an event. Remember how we did this event? There's 3 ways to do an event. And I didn't ask you this on your quiz because I think it's a little bit mean. Because I'll tell you right now, events are very complex, and even though they've been introduced like first day, like week 1, I still think we need to take them up again. Remember, there's 2 pieces to event. One is the event listener, and the other one is the event handler, right? And we can do it separately like this, all right? So normally I recommend this kind of event handling. So it's send button dot add event listener. We're going to add the event listener, and what this does is it creates an asynchronous. Hear me when I say this, asynchronous function. Yes. I don't recommend it. No, this is the way better way to do it. And I choose the type of event. In this particular case, it's called click. There's different kinds of events. We'll talk about them. And then notice if I get my code hinting, my listener, what am I listening for? This is my click event. And then what kind of event? Now, there's 2 ways to do this. I can do it inline, right? Like right here, which is something like this. This is the first way. Function, right? And inline, I can write my function right in here. Okay? By the way, this looks really goddamn ugly, right? I'm just saying. Right? Because by function, I'm actually declaring my inline function right here. Okay? So here's my event listener, and then inside my event listener, right in here, I can kind of do my event, which is, prevent default behavior, right? Which is what I want to do, right? I want to prevent default behavior. And the other thing, what I want to do is I want to kind of capture the event, right? So if I go whatever the event is, so this is my event. And then I want to kind of go event, prevent default. Right? That's my prevent default. Right? That's what I want to do. So my event itself, I'll prevent my default behavior. And if you want to look at what that means, because you don't know what I'm talking about, look up prevent default behavior in JavaScript. Right? If you look up prevent default behavior, you're going to see the prevent default event method, right? W3 Schools is kind of good for that. It actually gives you an example of what an event will look like, right? So here's the event. Now you're seeing that there's an event parameter, right? But where's that event parameter coming from? You're going to say, well, I don't understand this because I never pass anything to my event. But actually, it's being passed into the event automatically from the actual event that's occurring. So when I click on something, my click is creating the event itself, right? And that is being passed into this variable event, or whatever you want to call it. You don't have to call it event. You can call it my variable, right? And then what we want to do is we want to create this prevent default, right? Prevent default. So that way, the click event doesn't do what it's supposed to do inside my form. And it tells you the prevent default method cancels the event if it is cancelable, meaning that the default action that belongs to the event will not occur, right? That's what it does, right? Will not occur. So the button event that we normally would get that sends everything into the form will not occur. Let's see if that works, right? So we need to do this in order for our little form to capture the data, right? And I want to do it first. So let's go through this. So this is prevent default stuff is critical to making your form work for assignment 2, right? You don't do something like this, your assignment 2 will fail. It won't work because you won't be able to push everything out to the console. Yeah. Not yet. First, first I want to try and cancel the event, right? So let's try this out. So let's go back to the over here into my my form. Here's my contact form, right? And I'm gonna refresh. And now I'm gonna kind of enter the information here, keeping this window up so I can see what I'm talking about here. So I'm gonna say Tom, and then I'm gonna put in my name and my email. And then what I want to do is my contact number, as an example, right? So 416. Remember what happened last time? When I clicked the button, everything got wiped out and my form was submitted, right? I don't want that to happen. And here's my message. I click the button, right? Click send. Nothing happened, right? Why? Because I've canceled the default behavior for the button, which is to submit my form. Okay, now this is a good thing and a bad thing. Let me show you again. So here's my default behavior. I've got all this stuff. See what I've done? If I'm clicking the button, right? See how it's working? And especially if I delete some of this stuff. If I click the button, does it give me any kind of code hinting or any kind of validation whatsoever? No validation, right? Right? So how do I fix that? I want to get some validation, but I want to stop my button from firing, right? How do I do that? So if we looked it up, we want to prevent the form from being submitted. Prevent form submit through JavaScript, right? That's what I want. I want prevent form submit from JavaScript. And if you notice, yep. What's that? I'll show you, because if you don't prevent it, then all your data is gone, unless you send it somewhere, right? And we're not sending it anywhere right now. We're sending it to the console, which is what I want you to do. That's the exact behavior I want you to make, right? And so because I'm asking you for that exact thing, that's a problem, right? And now look what the solutions are, right? So here's my function, validate my form, right? And then return to previous page, otherwise blah, blah. This isn't really good. Okay, this isn't the solution. Because form on submit event, oh, there it is, prevent default, right? So now, hey, take a look. Here's something, right? I can submit my button. I can prevent default on my button, but I can also create an event on my form, right? The submit event, the submit, on submit. If I say on something, instead of I take away on, and I have my submit event, right? So let's try this out. All right. So if I go back to this, so I've got an event handler for my button. Let's take this away for a second, and so I can prove to you that this works, right? Again, here's this inline event handler. By the way, there's another way to write this thing. I can remove this, right, and create a named function, like for example, send button click, right? This is my new named function. Now this function doesn't exist right now, and I could create it underneath like this. Something like this, function, right? A name function, send button click, right? And I could create my function inside here by passing through the event argument that we're going to get from anytime I click something or any kind of event that I'm doing with my button. And then I could do something like console.log, clicked, right? That every time I click, it's going to call this function, which is now going to be the event handler, and it's going to output to the console clicked when I click the button, whether it submits or not. But I'm not stopping the default action for the button anymore. So if I was to go there and go back to my form, so here's my form, and if I refresh, right? Well, how come my debugger went off? I refresh my form. I didn't actually add my debugger in there, but let's just try this out. Sorry. Let's just kick this off again, Mr. Tom. Sorry, contact me. And if I was to go into my inspector and I click on the send button, it tells me this stuff here is happening again. It turns it on. Let's go into the console. It still does clicked. And I can click this as many times as I want, but it'll still do the validation and give me the stuff here on the console saying clicked, right? Problem is when I actually submit my form, anything that I pump up to the console like clicked is gone. Take a look. So if I put in Tom and my stuff again, right, and my email, because this is the way forms work. Forms in HTML are listening for a submission. And as soon as I click a button that's associated with the form that's inside the form itself, it will automatically submit the form, which will wipe away my data on the console, right? So 416, 555, 5555, whatever, and then hello. And if I click the form, click it, now it's ready. Watch the console, right? See the console here, right? The console says click, but if I click my form, bam, it's submitted, and my console's blank. This is not what I want you to do. This is what I want you to prevent. I want you to prevent this behavior, right? I want you to validate your form, but also keep your console, all the data in your console, right? So let's try adding the event handler. And again, there's different ways of doing this. Now, this is kind of, as we're forming up our solution, right? I'm kind of thinking of ways of forming this up. So we have an event handler for the button, okay? Let's make an event handler for the form, because the form has an event that's happening. It's called the submit action. And let's check this out. And I'll notice that it says paused in debugger. Huh? Not yet. No, I'm showing you that mine's pausing in debugger because I put something up in my debugger to do that. And I'll show you that debugging in a second. In fact, if you notice in my, I believe in my, because I've kept Chrome up, I was practicing debugging, and that's what's happening with it. So if I go to sources over here, yeah, see, I actually put up a debug. I'll talk about that in a second. That's why it's doing that. Okay. So how do I fix that? How do I fix that? Let's try this thing and see if we can get this fixed. So I'm going to go back to here, and this is the clicked event. Let's make another one. We need to make a link, create a reference to the form now. All right, let's try this out. So we'll say, okay, create a reference to the form, right? And then we'll say var. And by the way, want to make sure it's the right. If we have an index, we have some kind of. Here's my contact form. My form should have some kind of ID, and we have this. It's called contact form. That's the one I set up from last day. So that's how I'm linking to it. Right? Notice that there is no action or method, right, listed in the form right now. It's kind of blanked, right? Okay. Let's go back and try this again. So I'm going to go back to my app.js, and its contact form is what I want to link to. So var, I'm just going to call it the same thing. Contact form is equal to document.getElement by ID. And again, you can do document by getElement by class name as well. Talk about that later on. And it's contact form, which is what I want. There it is. And we'll do the same function, but instead of doing it like this with a name function, we'll just do an inline again. Right? So I'll say, I'll say contact form add event listener, right? And we're listening for the submit action, and we're going to do an inline function here. We're passing in the event variable, right? And we need to put the extra closing bracket. There we go. All right, so inside this, I want to say, just to test it for now, I'm going to put a console.log that says submitted. Be careful, because if I was going to check this out on submitted will be gone, right? Remember I was talking about it being canceled. I'm going to save this thing. I'm going to refresh my form. Here it is, right? And now let's put in some dummy data. So remember, it can also do this. There's no validation, right? T at T, or T at G, sure. And then 4 and like this, right? And then if I click send, you saw it briefly, but then it's gone, right? Because it submitted the form. On submit, it tried to do something, and I saw that console log temporarily. It's gone, right? Everything's gone. All right, let's go back.
Why doesn't click remain in console?
Sorry?
So why doesn't click remain in console?
Because the form was submitted. When the form gets submitted, it wipes itself out, right? It wipes itself out. And what it does is, typically it goes somewhere else. It gets processed somewhere else. For example, a PHP page, which would process your form. Or a Node.js page, which would process your form. Or an ASP.NET page that would process your form on the server side. Because forms get processed on the server side typically, not on the client side, right? And so that's why it wipes out your form. Actually, it kind of clears up your form. That's the default behavior for the form. We're going to cancel that behavior by going, prevent default. Let's try this out. So go back to here. Something new you're learning today. All right. So here, instead of doing this, before it does a console log, I'm going to say event.prevent default, right? Prevent default for my form submission. All right. So save. And we'll do it again. We'll refresh the page, because we always have to refresh whenever we do a change. Otherwise, it'll always have the previous cache. We have to refresh the browser so it has a new code. That's why I'm refreshing the page all the time. So I said Tom Jones. There we go, Tom Jones. t@j.com, some simple stuff, a number, because there's no validation right now, or very little. And then when I click send, hey, look what happened. I got clicked and submitted. But the great thing was, if I refresh the page for a second, if I type in something and if I click send, I still get the validation. So the right thing to do to prevent my form from clearing, right, is get this validation. Now, how do I clear the form? How do I clear a form with JavaScript, right? I could create a separate function that I replace all my fields with blanks. I could do that. Like, for example, take my value of each of my fields, because each field has a value, right? An example of this would be if I was to go to each of my fields in my form. So if I go to my contact HTML, I have my input. Each input field, right? This is the text field, right? Each input field has a value, right? Now the value attribute isn't here, but it has a value. And I want to be able to go in there and reset it to something else. So here's something. This is a test. When I click submit, I want to change my value, the actual value that's inside my form. I want to change it to something else. All right? Let's see what happens there. And not the submit button, but actually when my form gets submitted. All right? How do I do that? So again, if I go back to JavaScript, stop me if you don't understand, because it's going to get more hairy from here. Right? All right, so we have a value, and each of my fields has an ID. No? Let's take a look. Remember, I've kind of built my form out so that each ID, each field, like first name and last name and email, and all these things have different IDs. That means I can latch onto them with JavaScript because I have something to latch onto. Let's get rid of my first name for now when my JavaScript, when I submit my form. So first name, I need to make a link to this first, and then I can wipe it out. Okay, let's try this out. So just like before, right, I'm just kind of doing an inline here, and I could be a little bit more organized because I'm doing event listeners and everything all at once. But let's suppose that I'm going to do another. I'm going to kind of create another variable, and I'm going to call this, first name. There's my first name variable. It is equal to document.getElementById, and we're going to call this first name. So it's latching on to a first name variable, and then I'm going to say something like this: first name, right? Dot. If I start typing value, node value, no. So what's the command, right, to get the value, right? Get the value or set the value. Listen to what I'm saying. Get the value or set the value of a of an attribute or of an actual item. So look, it says I can get bound clients. I can do hidden IDs. This is the ID of the form, or the actual value. Last child, first child. These are all the different things I can do here. And if I keep going down, node value, we're going to see what that is, right? What's node value? If you don't know what you're looking for, it'll tell you all the stuff that you can do, right? Let's keep looking down here. And if I keep going down, even if I start typing val, right? And notice that there's a bunch of different things here. There's index, length, console, paragraph elements, send button, and it keeps going da 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 da. So I want to get the value of my first name. So again, if you don't know how to do that, my recommendation again is do one of these. So get value of input JavaScript. And again, how to get the value input text value in JavaScript. And it's going to give you the solution very simply, right? It says, here's my input type. And you make a document.getElementById. This is this item, right? Because the ID is this ID, in this example, right? And then value. Guys, it's like totally idiot, silly, right? Let's try it out, right? So the value of my thing. So if I type in value, right? And if this is correct, first name.value, right? I want to make it equal to something, like for example, equal to this, right? Let's see if that's true. If the actual Stack Overflow helped us or not. By the way, sometimes it doesn't, right? I'm just putting it out there if you guys are going to search like this. All right, so let's try it again. So I saved everything, updated my form, go back to my contact page, refresh it, right? And then put in some dummy values again. right? And then, by the way, this is how dumb the form is right now because it doesn't do any real validation. I'm putting it out there. And now if I click send, it should clear this form out, right? Oh, no. Right? So it didn't clear my first name at all, right? So did I get an error? No. So it failed, but it failed silently, right? Yeah, I got to figure this out, right? So what's the reason why I'm getting this? And let's look at this. First name dot value. I'm trying to set something here, right? Okay. How about if I want to show my first name value, right? I want to show my first name value as an example, because this is you need to do this kind of stuff when we print this out. I want to show my first name dot value, right, when I submit my form, right? So that's inside here in my submit function. Let's try this out. So here's first I got to do this before my submit function. So I'm going to copy this or cut it. And up here, before my submit event listener happens, I've got to have a reference to my my first element, right? So my first field. So create a reference to the first name field, right? Okay, cool. That's what I do up here. And inside here, I want to when on submit, that's what's happening here. Even though I'm preventing default value, I want to get the value of my first name. Okay, this is the challenge now, right? How do I do both all at the same time, right? So I'm going to say something like, what I meant was that on console submitted, console.log, and I'll do something like this, first name value. Now, if I go start typing value, it says node value, right? Node value, and this is a string. It's kind of pushing me to node value as opposed to just to value. In fact, there is no node value. There's no value like we see here. But let's just put it in anyway because that's what it says on code on Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow is always right, right? Let's check this out and see what I get here when I do first name value. Right? Tell me. Okay, console.log. I mean, how about that? Is that okay?
No.
Oh, come on, man. I was trying to debug. I want an error. I want errors, right? Okay, cool. So I've refreshed Tom, Smith, T, my contact number, my message. Okay, and now I want to click send. Okay. What do you mean? Not sending it anywhere. Remember, it's not completing my form. I'm preventing my default behavior. Now take a look. I did get my value, Tom, right? My value, which is this, even though it didn't come up, right? I got it. I returned it to the console. This is like almost a solution for your assignment too, right?
Oh, you want to spit it out on the console.
That's what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to take it out on the console. This is the way to do it, right? Okay, but what about setting the value? So I do a console log, and then what I want to do is I want to get rid of it. So can I do something like this? This is what I'm asking. First name dot value is equal to this, right? Can I do that on submit? I want to change my value so it's nothing. I clear it afterwards. Is that possible? That's what I'm asking. So first I print the value to the console, and then I erase it from my form, from my actual attribute, right? So let's see this, right? So this is the way I want to clear my value. So again, reset, and I put some my information in, Tom, T at T, whatever, just to make it work, and then a number and some kind of value in here, and then click send, right? And ta-da, it's gone. Now, how come it worked inside my event listener, but it didn't work outside my event listener, right? Well, because my friends, right? Inside my event listener, which is right in here, this is my event handler, right? And my event listener all together. It happens asynchronously. That means it's happening at a different phase of the page event lifecycle as opposed to what's happening normally, right? In the beginning, my form has no value for Tom, right? And remember that the only time that this piece runs, is when I've clicked my button. So what I've actually asked it to do when I use first name.value is equal to nothing, I'm clearing it up as an example, by itself out here somewhere in the global space, well, actually local to my self-contained function, right? it's happening as soon as I run my code, right? Because my code is running as soon as my function runs, but it's run as the page is loading, as my form is loading up. And so there is no value for Tom, right? There is no value for my first name. And so, but if I wanted every single time when I submit to clear my values, that's what I would have to do. Now, if I want to clear every single value on my form, right, is there a way to clear my form without submitting? Yeah. No, it runs asynchronously, which means it'll run as soon as I click it, anytime I click it. It's a separate process that's running in parallel to my regular process. Yeah. I could create a clear button, but I need to be able to clear it. Is there a fast way? Is there a specific? Mike, this is my question to you. Is there a specific function that I can use to clear the form, right? Clear all the form values, as opposed to go through each one of them, because I would have to go through each one of them here and clear it. Is there a specific form of function to clear the values? So again, I would Google this, right? And I would say, okay, clear clear form values JavaScript. On jQuery, it's totally possible, but on JavaScript, as an example, it becomes more, well, form reset method, right? So if you notice, document.element by my form, reset. Okay, this isn't what I want, because if I reset my form, does it clear my screen? That's the question. If it doesn't clear my screen, if it doesn't submit, this is the solution. I can clear my form as soon as I submit. Let's try this out. And if you notice, my form is called my contact form. All right, now this is interesting because I'm doing it as I go. Let's try this out. And what I mean by that is inside my event lister for my form itself, and the form is called contact form, I'm going to reset it, right? So instead of doing this, each one of my values, I can just do, from what it says, something like this: contact form reset. Right? Okay, so reset will reset my entire form from what it's saying. Let's see if this works. Okay, but it's still going to keep my value. So if I wanted to kind of do something like, if I want to still do first name, dot value, I want to print this out to the console. Sorry, I'm just forming this up really weird. Right? So I want to do a console log first name dot value. I want to print that out, and then I want to reset the form. It shouldn't wipe out my console. That's what I'm not looking to do, right? So let's check this out, and then I'll take a break, and we'll come back. Okay. All right. So going back here to my contact page, refresh. Okay. There's my first name, Smith, and then T at T, really quickly, and then 4, and some message. Whatever. And then if I click send, it'll give me Tom and clear my form. Okay, so takeaways from this one. Okay, for you guys, for assignment 2, I'm giving you the solution, right, for how to do this properly. From what I'm looking for, you need to prevent the default behavior for your form, right? You still don't want to prevent the default behavior for your button, because if you prevent the default behavior for your button, your form will not give you any kind of client-side validation whatsoever. So all that client-side HTML5 validation that you're getting, it'll prevent it if you use the prevent default here in the button. So you want to do it in your form on the submit event. That's what you're looking for. And what you're doing is you want to prevent the form, spit out the values, and then reset the form. So you can type it in again. Yes? The form will be enough. The button itself, we can do other things with. All I said was in the details was when you click the send button, it'll spit out the values to the console. That's all I said, right? And what you need to do is actually, it's not on the button, but rather on the form that you have to create in order for you to do this. Okay, so that's the solution. Now I'm going to leave the other finer detail to you. I'm not going to spit out every value. I've done first name for you, right? I want you to do all of them. And I want you to make it pretty, please. So it should say something like this. First name, right, plus first name value, right? So that's what should be on the console. And maybe even my recommendation is you call a separate function that kind of shows the form, right? How do I do that? I would have something like this: function show form, form input. So I'm making this up here. I would take this console log, right? This is the one I want, cut it, put it inside my form here, my function, show form input, and call my show form input right here. Right? So I'm calling show form input from my event listener, and this show form input is going to do this, console log each one of the values. I'm not going to do the other ones for you. And you can pretty this up. You can add some additional things here. So console log, you can add in some, I don't know, some kind of decoration around the form, whatever it's going to be. If you want to get really, whatever, you can make this fancy. But you want to make it so that it's something, so it doesn't look like it's, it's ridiculous. It's like just some little values, right? Okay, so there we go. So there's my show form input with a little bit of decoration. And then as I submit my form, it's going to show me my first name and the form data right here. All right, let's show this out. So again, if I refresh, here's Tom, Smith, email, and then some numbers and my message. And if I click send, I get the following output down here. It clears my form, and I get this first name Tom. Yeah. No. No, actually you can with JavaScript. You can prevent it from happening, but you don't want to. You want to make sure that this form, this message box is this is the behavior that the default behavior for HTML5. Questions before we break? So again, just a recap. I've created 2 event handlers. There's really only necessary for one to be created, just for the form, right? And there's 2 different ways of creating event handlers, right? I'm going to test you on this next time when it comes to event handlers. 2 different ways. I can write it inline like this. This is inline, right? And I can write it as a named function like this. This is an event handler. This is an event listener. 2 different parts. Or I can write it with one part all together in one. If you're only going to do it one time, and you're never going to call this event handler here, if you're never going to call the event handler here ever again, you might as well write it this way. Right? If this is confusing to you and this makes more sense to you, I'm okay with you writing it this way, 2 separate parts. So this would be the event listener, right? And this would be the event handler, this piece, right? Okay? That's what those 2 pieces are. Here, event listener with inline, right? Anonymous event handler function. That's what this is. And that's what it starts from here, from this function. You're going to see a lot of this. And by the way, there's one more name this is called. It's called, to take this back from a naming convention perspective, it's called a callback function. Right? This callback function, right, is called when the submit event is triggered. When the submit event is triggered for the form, this callback function is called. That's what happens. That's the callback function. All right? So again, some different names. You might hear callback function. What is a callback function? It's a function that's triggered in line like this due to an event or something else, some other kind of function. Okay, let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll do some debugging.